Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Ah,
We have
kicking
to
it.
bring Marisol on so everyone can see her.
Oh, Toby will come next time. Toby's
Yeah,
eating dinner right now. Oh, she's
this
so
is the
precious.
way to kick it off. This is the way to kick it off. Thank you. Hi,
This is
Marisol.
she gets her bully stick.
Ah, perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
now you're
Okay.
ready to go and she'll be good.
All righty. Well, that is a great
Mike
intro.
and
So
Sarah are here.
As she
I'm gonna
yanks out my headphones.
I'm gonna scrap my intro because the dog took it away from me. But
No, do your
thanks for
intro.
joining. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm Megan Sachs, criminologist and host of Women in Crime podcast. I am joined by Amy Schlossberg, my
Hello.
lovely co-host and also criminologist and also best friend. Just want to point that out again.
Mhm.
And we are also here with Collier Landry, documentary filmmaker, host of the Collier Landry Show, and really just an awesome person with a great dog.
Great.
And why are we here? Yeah, great dog. I mean, I got to point that out. So we're here tonight chatting about the Karen Reed retrial, which we're about to dive into. And oh boy, there's a lot to talk about. Oh my goodness. We've been getting emails, comments. I don't know about you guys, but I've been doing my very best to watch the trial. For me, I love trial watching. I'm a total court junkie, but my real job is getting in the way of it. So I thought about like calling out of work sick this week and realized it's the week before finals, and I don't think that would fly with
No.
our administration. Okay, well, that's fine. So for those of you, most people watching are probably pretty familiar with the case, right? But was thinking maybe we could just do like a short recap for those of you who might not remember some of the details. And Collier, you were on top of this case for the first trial, so you can correct me if I get anything wrong.
Well, I don't I mean here I won't correct, but I will say this to my audience who are like, why are you now talking about the Karen Reed trial, the second version, when you said you wouldn't? It's like the scene in The Godfather. Just when I'm out, they pull me back in. And The Godfather Part 3, which is the only memorable thing and only thing worth watching, is The
From The
Godfather
Godfather
3.
3.
But once
Yeah,
they
I
pull
agree.
me back in. And that's what you guys have done because you're both so brilliant. As I said in the comments, you've pulled me in you've roped me in with your genius, your experience. And I said,
Oh,
let's do this. And I have been
oh,
watching a
that's
little bit of
generous.
the trial. I catch it
Mhm,
on channels like
yeah,
Emily D. Baker, Lawyer
mhm,
I feel that
yeah.
these people are on top, but I'll get into my feelings on that because I'm just glad that I just don't talk about it a lot because it is it is exponentially more polarizing this time around, and
Mhm.
Oh my
it's
gosh,
Wild
that's
West. This is the Wild
yeah.
West.
I was about to ask you about that. All right, well, you can save that opinion because that's one of the questions or topics we're gonna broach later.
Yeah.
But, just a brief recap for some people. This case is, as Collier said, really divisive and polarizing. But how it all began was a snowy night in January of 2022. Karen Reed and her then boyfriend, John O'Keefe, decide to head out to the bars in Canton, Massachusetts. Everyone's partying, having a good time. It's about to be as I think, like a nor'easter, right? Um, anyway, they meet up with some acquaintances and a few of them wanna keep the party going, and this is just after midnight, when someone invites John and Karen back to his house, and that was also police officer, Brian Albert. So, this is about 12:30, I guess. They head out, they're headed for his house, and then fast forward to 6 a.m. in the morning, and John O'Keefe is found lying outside of the Alberts' home, covered by snow, injuries, cold to the touch, and unresponsive. He was taken to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. Now, while John officially died from blunt force trauma and hypothermia, how he came to that trauma and how he came to be lying outside in the snow, outside the Alberts' home, is really the question at the heart of this case. Um, so pretty quickly, the police arrested John's girlfriend, Karen Reed, and this was just a few days after his death, and they charged her with manslaughter and leaving the scene of a crime. They basically alleged that Karen, very angry with John after the two had been fighting a lot actually, and they have some text messages that really show, the nature of the fights and maybe a little bit about their relationship. They allege that she backed her vehicle into him and front of the Alberts home, running John down and then leaving him there in the snow to die. So she was later indicted on the more serious charge of second-degree murder. Um, Reed denied the allegations, and she opted to take her case to trial, which, Amy, as we know in our field, is kind of a rarity, right?
Yep. Very rare. What, 3% of cases make it to trial?
Yeah, about 3 to 5, something like
Mm.
that. So,
I
but
wasn't surprised, though. Were you surprised that this went to trial?
oh, no. No, no, no. No, she was definitely going to trial. And she has a pretty shocking defense. I think that's the more interesting part. So, what was this defense? Well, her team alleges that she had nothing to do with this, that John O'Keefe, in fact, went into Brian Albert's house where he was ambushed. He was attacked, he was beaten to death, and he was then thrown out in the snow and left to die by some members, one or more in that house. So the question becomes, did this woman murder her boyfriend by running him down with her car? Or is it possible that she was being framed by a very powerful institution? And that would have to be the Boston Police Department. And I think there's some other institutions that are sort of in the mix here. It would be a very large conspiracy. Her trial began in April 2024 and ended in July 2024 with a hung jury. So they just couldn't decide, which I don't think was a huge surprise. Um, Reed's second trial began this month, and that's where we are today. That kind of brings us up to date. We did cover this case in an episode on Women in Crime, episode 180, but that was prior to trial as well. But if you want to listen or you want a deeper dive, go back.
And I don't think we were surprised that the prosecution took this back to trial, because sometimes when there's a hung jury, the prosecution's not going to bother, or they'll wait a longer time to try to gather more evidence. But in this case, it happened fast.
They announced it
Oh,
within like 2 hours of the hung jury or something crazy. Like
right?
they're on the
That's
steps
unheard of.
claiming victory, and then they're like, "Oh, they're going to retry it." Like
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anyone was surprised about that, right?
Mm-mm.
Good call. So wow. So much to discuss here. I have so many questions. I know other people are gonna have questions. I'm gonna just kick us off, and start talking about the media sensation of this case. And as someone who teaches crime and media, I get the question a lot, like, what makes certain cases so sensational in the media? So any thoughts? I'll kick it over to either one of you or both of you about why this case has become so
I
sensationalized.
think Collier is gonna have a much better answer than me. So I'm gonna give my very
Yeah.
quick opinion. It reminds me of Melanie McGuire case that we've covered in the past. I think
Okay.
it's the fact that Karen is an attractive, middle-class white woman. I think that's probably one of the main reasons, but I think
Okay.
Collier could probably expand on that much better.
Oh yeah, he's got some opinions. What do you think, Collier? And I have them too. Collier, what do you think?
Oy vey, as I often say on my program. And just to be clear for your audience, I am not a true crime fan. I am somebody who was forced into
Right.
being in the true crime world. We can get to that another topic or whatever. And I made a movie, A Murder in Mansfield. So all these things are very personal for me. And so I have a very unique lens of which I look at these things through, which is as the son of both a perpetrator and a victim. Is I try to see both sides, right? And I see the public excoriation from both sides, right? Why do I think this has become so sensationalized? Like I
Mhm.
didn't talk about this. I entered the Karen Reed scenario like last year when I was covering. I think I was 6 or 7 weeks into the trial before I even
Mhm.
started talking about it. And for me, and because I look at it as like a documentary filmmaker as well, this is a perfect storm
Yeah.
of obviously you have an attractive white woman. That's a great point. You have a police officer who's also very attractive,
Mhm. Yes.
who's murdered. But you have this conspiracy theory element that I think really is a massive draw to so many people.
Mhm.
It is obviously a massive draw in the true crime world. It is a massive draw in documentary filmmaking. All of these things. I can name many. There are many a documentary has been made that follows the path of a conspiracy theory,
Mhm.
and I think that And as you know, and this all was kicked off by a gentleman named Aidan Carney, or Aidan Kearney, however you want to pronounce it. He goes by Turtle Boy or Dr. Turtle Boy on Twitter. And he's sort of the one who rang the alarm bell. And he's basically the person who created the Free Karen Reed movement, right?
Yeah.
So has been out there very public. His style's a little much for me, a little overt, but he's very passionate about what he talks about. So
he sure is. That's one way.
We'll leave it at that. There's a lot of passion behind his words and what he does. And he's gotten himself into trouble a little bit in this case, and he's gone through some jail time, and been arrested, and he's got a pending legal case, witness intimidation, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things when I look at true crime in general is that everybody wants to be involved. And now with social media, everybody can weigh in. And it feels like in this particular case, and I shudder to think like if this was a case when my father was on trial, because it would be a whole other different situation.
Right.
But everybody needs to be involved. They draw the battle lines. And I think that's a very bad thing in a lot of ways. Look, she is innocent until proven guilty. But the way that these social media narratives from both sides come at, and these harpoons that are being tossed back and forth, it is it's dangerous. It's so much that I didn't even want to talk about it this time around, but I was like, it's very polarizing. People are very passionate. I'd rather talk about Trump and tariffs than this.
I'm not going to stay for that part. So.
But Collier, how did one local YouTuber, Turtle Boy, how did he
he wasn't even a YouTuber. He was a blogger. He was a blogger.
A blogger.
He was like a journalist. He was a blogger. And, I think he was a retired, former school teacher. I don't know his CV, but my understanding he was like a school teacher, but he's lives in the community that this happened. And I think felt very strongly about what happened and felt galvanized to take the side of Karen Reed, and just thought this is bullshit. This couldn't have happened. And I am of the sort of belief that two things can be true at the same time in this case.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm not. I have a very good friend who works for the federal government, very high up there in the Department of Homeland Security. He is former DEA, former Secret Service. He says to me years ago, he's like, Collier, the notion of a conspiracy theory hinges on the fact that those who are the ones behind said conspiracy theory, actually know what they're doing. And I always think about that, because when people talk about the government, and he's like, they can't even get my paycheck. They can't fix the photocopier. How do they cover up 9/11? It's, you know what I mean?
That's a valid point.
He's like, this is utterly fanciful to think that there's this type of organization that exists. And I think, I interviewed somebody at the very start of this last May, Sonny Slaughter, who is also a criminal, trains DHS agents and works for a division of Homeland Security. And she was like, I think, because they're throwing phones out, there's all this stuff that goes around. She's like, I think they were doing something else, and it just happened to happen all at the same time. And I kind of agree with that. I think all these people are shady. But I think it might have nothing to do with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed.
Got it.
It might have to do with a whole other thing, because let's face it, the prosecutor who is trying her now is Hank Brennan, who most famously represented the ultimate of Bostonian corruption, Whitey Bulger. So,
I know. That was a really interesting turn of events. It wasn't that surprising, I guess, that they brought in a special prosecutor. And also someone who has experience on both sides, right? Prosecution and defense. So that's not surprising. But Whitey Bulger, I was like, wow.
I think it's so important that we need to underscore what Collier said, is sometimes people think it's so black or white. It's like either this is or this is. And I think that's the best point. And that's what I teach when I talk to my students about the criminal justice system, right? These are not mutually exclusive. There could be some shady shit going on. She could be guilty. She could be innocent. These are like two totally different questions, I think. So I really appreciate that perspective.
And, I've been diving into the other side. So the Free Karen Reed, I'm very familiar with a lot of the characters that are involved in that, and people who are very passionate about that side. So I started diving into the other side of Twitter, just more for entertainment purposes than anything. But, also when this happened, she came under a lot of attack, and she she is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And
Yeah.
and if there's reasonable doubt, like that's how our justice system works, which I think is a
Mhm.
fascinating case study is in this situation is like, look, if there's reasonable doubt, she needs to be acquitted.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I also think they've completely overcharged her. I thought they did it the first time. I think
Yes.
I mean,
Well, the
eh,
overcharging was to force her into a plea.
Mhm.
of course, but
I
this time
mean,
around, they're doing the same thing, and it's
yeah,
like she's not going to plea out.
Mhm.
I just,
no, she's not
I,
gonna plead guilty, but I think
I
that
just
was
think it's,
the hope, right?
of
Like,
course,
overcharge her. She'll plead to the manslaughter. Of course she will. We'll offer her a sweet deal, but there was no way. Especially,
Mhm.
I
yeah.
think, one of the sensational things about this case too is the lawyers. So we talked about the prosecutor, but she's got David Yannetti and she's got Alan Jackson, who's
Mhm.
pretty high powered himself.
From
Um,
LA. He's a fellow Los Angelino.
he is, that's correct. But do you think that works against him in their community that he's an outsider? Yes, he is a very he's got a great reputation. He's a winner. And he's, I would say, a good lawyer in my opinion. He does a lot. I mean, he's zealously representing his client. But do you think it works against him that he's not, yeah, that he's an outsider
Um, I don't think it works against him. I think if anything, it works for him
for
because
him?
I think that he, look, he comes with the big guns, and I think it's much better that he's not a part of this community. I mean,
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yannetti is a Boston lawyer,
yeah,
and he was the first call, and then he's got his firm that's been representing Karen from I think 5 days into all this
yeah,
happening. So she was on the phone with text messages with him. I think they're all fantastic lawyers. I think they're
yeah.
doing a fantastic job. I think again, their job is to have reasonable doubt.
Mhm.
And this is the way the justice system is supposed to work. And again, these people are like, well, she did this and he did this and they did this. And it's like, but okay, but if you were on trial
Yeah,
facing the same thing, you would want
yeah.
the same justice system that we all deserve,
Mhm.
you know?
You want the most zealous representation too.
And
Someone who
absolutely, you better believe it. You better believe it.
Mhm.
Collier,
So
you were talking about, you had mentioned something about, Karen before and, like the free Karen Reed movement. Why do you guys think, people have rallied behind her so strongly? Usually, when there's a police officer, I think, especially a police officer that's been murdered, that's the side that gets the vote or the sympathy. In this case, yes, I am not saying there's not a lot of, supporters on his side, but very strong Karen Reed movement. Why do you think that is? And I have my own opinion, which I can share too, but I'm putting you guys on the spot first, clearly.
I don't think the evidence shows 100% that I think there's enough reasonable doubt that the court of public opinion has questions, and I don't think people are ready, to quite say that she's guilty. Plus, I just think people like to be part of these polarized conversations. So if they feel a little bit that she's innocent, they're gonna be like, she's innocent, just to, have that to stand on,
But
I
do you
think.
think they relate to her? Do you think this is like a David versus Goliath and people see her like as the little guy and like, the whole a corrupt system is trying to frame her and
Yeah, people that love conspiracy theories, I think definitely are riding onto Karen's side for that. Absolutely, especially what we've seen in the last couple of years with, police and cover-ups, and yeah, I think people are quick to believe conspiracy theories against the police.
what do you think, Collier?
so I think this, I had a conversation a very long time ago. I was in Amsterdam for IDFA, which is a massive documentary
Oh, yeah.
festival. And I met Damon Davis, who made a film called Whose Streets. He was one of the producers. And that is about the Ferguson uprising, the murder of Michael Brown.
Mhm.
And I think if I could trace it back, it started sort of then in those movements,
Mhm.
this massive distrust of the police in
Right.
America, starting with starting with the weaponization of police forces in general, bringing back military gear and arming the Ferguson Police Department with tanks and battle armor and things like that, and just
Yeah.
seeing that play out. And I think that that is just snowballed. Obviously it snowballs into 2020 with forgot the gentleman who was murdered by
George
Derek
Floyd?
Chauvin, George Floyd.
Boy.
Thank you very
Uh,
much. And I won't get into the specifics of that case, but like, there's somebody in jail for murdering him. Like, let's put it, several people are in jail for that. But I think that it just snowballs into this. And I think that again, there's a conspiracy theory aspect to this, which galvanizes people as well. And I think I also think that there are people in the community that were genuinely disaffected or disillusioned with their local police and saw corruption.
Yeah.
And see, see the corruption and just are like, we're sick of it. Like, we're sick of it. And whether or not that is the case with Karen Reed, they've experienced that in their personal lives. So of course they're going to take up and protest and make banners or what have you, and join the movement, because they're galvanized by what they see as an injustice. And I don't blame them.
It almost reminds me of, maybe they didn't do this, but they did something. Like when people are wrongfully convicted, it's this idea like, okay, well, maybe they didn't do this to Karen, but they're doing some shady shit, so we want them to pay.
I think the push-pull in the justice system in general, and the push-pull with it, for example, you started off this conversation saying that 3% of cases go to trial because, I don't know if you guys have ever seen, 13th, which is a fabulous film. I don't know who directed it, but I think Ava DuVernay produced it. Brad Pitt produced it. Absolutely, just a fantastic film. But it talks about these plea deals, which these people are, and let's call it what it is, mostly minorities that are affected by this, or poor people who are affected by this, are pushed and badgered into taking a plea deal for something they may or may not have done, or maybe they're charged with something. And we all know this, that prosecutors stack these charges to intimidate you, right? To make, because they know, okay, we'll get it all. We throw as much as we can, and then we start to claw that back when we're making a deal, right? So I think that they've pushed around the sort of the minority population, whether it be socioeconomically or whether it be by race or gender, and I think they push them around so much in the United States that this becomes something, and worldwide too. There's a lot of this, but outside the United States, but they push them around so much that I think that people are just like, we're fucking sick of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really what it is. So it doesn't even become, it's not even about Karen Reed at that point.
No,
and that's what I think is what this is all about. It's not even about her, because I think when you're looking at certain things in the case and like, oh, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, both sides going, it's a much bigger thing. She comes much like George Floyd did, becomes a symbol of something else for people. And that's where I think that this goes.
Collier, I agree. I think she's emblematic of the frustration, the mistrust, I think people have that stock in her because of the same reason, and because they see possible corruption, and they see, an average person. She's an ordinary person who kind of found herself in this situation, and they think like, maybe she's relatable. This could be me, and I'm sick of this. So I do think
she's
it becomes
a university
about that,
professor like you guys.
I know. But this has become so much about her, and so much about, and she's on trial for her life. But do you think that John O'Keefe as a victim is getting lost in this mix?
That I think is the biggest travesty of all of this, is you've got these two sides bickering, and you've got this guy who's died, who has two children who he adopted, who are the children of his sister and his brother. His deceased sister and her husband, who died 4 months apart. So look, as a kid who grew up with massive trauma, you know what I mean? And I feel for these children. They've now lost a father figure. For all intents and purposes, what I've heard from him is that he was a really good guy. Like, this is not like some asshole. This was like a good guy. And most of those fights that you mentioned with him and Karen Reed had to do with the kids. Her getting upset at her for taking them to get their nails done during COVID, or buying them something, or like, you're spoiling them, don't do that. It's like, kids with parents type stuff. So I think that, I think that getting lost in all of this is the real tragedy here. And the father, and then, you do have people on the pro Karen Reed side that go after her mother. Karen, unfortunately, and this is what I want to speak to as a documentary filmmaker, watching these documentaries and these interviews ahead of the second trial. I'm like, who told her this was a good idea?
Oh
Because
gosh, I'm
I'm a
so
filmmaker. You better believe you sign that waiver. It's going in the film. Like I'm not here to defend you. I'm not
Mhm,
here to make you look good or bad. I'm here to tell a story.
mhm.
You know what I mean? I'm not going to cherry pick that
yeah.
stuff because then that's a bias on me on my side as a filmmaker. But some of the things I'm just going, oh God, I just wish you wouldn't have said that. And I think that's one of the things. And I know people hate Brennan and all but it's one of the things that he's used to his advantage, which did not come into play in the first trial, as far as I remember, is that he's using this footage
Mhm.
against her
Right,
because
right.
she's not going to take the witness stand. So let me establish her character through her own words.
Mhm.
Okay, so Collier,
And I
you're
think,
talking about the Hulu documentary, just so people know the 5-part
yeah,
series
or
if you
it's
haven't seen
Hulu or it
Body
was
in
on
the
Max or something. But yeah, there's one on Max. There's The Body in the Snow, which is on Max, and
Body in
which
the
was done by
Snow.
ID.
Mhm.
Shout out to ID. They helped me make Murder in Mansfield. And
Oh, nice.
so but yeah, I just thought it was, first of all, I thought it was really well done.
Mhm.
Really well done.
It
Very,
was.
very good. There was no bias to it. I didn't think either way. It just sort of
I
put
thought
it
it was
out there
great.
and like you
You
for
decide.
all of you
Mhm.
decide, which I
But
love.
why would anyone Amy, we know too, like, no defense attorney ever lets their clients talk, especially if they haven't testified. Is Alan Jackson that confident that
Or was this
Karen Reed
strategic in some way? He
well, I
thought
was part of the strategy is raising money, I think, right?
Mhm.
They're raising
Sure.
money for her defense. But is the strategy he thinks she's so convincing that she's gonna you know what I mean? She's going to convince the public and sort of win people over.
She's not
Because I can't
likable though, is she?
Yeah, she's gotten a
she's
lot of flack. Even during the
she's
trial, before you heard her words
Mhm.
of her face, which I thought was just terrible. Look at her
Right.
face. No, her face. I'm like, you sit there for 9 hours
Yeah.
and
people
don't
talk
pull a
about
daft
that,
face.
yeah.
I pull a daft face every 30 seconds on this show. Come on. It's like, come on. But I mean, seriously, so the way that they would
Mhm.
attack her, I just thought was just
Mhm.
all the other side, the anti-Karen Reed people attacking her
Mhm.
for her appearance, what she wore to court. I was like, get off it. Come on. Like
And
that's
that
It
not
wouldn't
happens
that's
way
not
matter
more
what
fair.
with
she looked like.
females.
If she was
Yeah,
happy, if she was sad, if she was wearing something
it
too
wouldn't matter.
provocative,
You're
not
damned if you do,
provocative,
you're damned if you don't. I mean, come
nothing
on.
she could have done. Megan,
Nothing.
remember that I sent you that article? I was shocked. It was like TMZ, and it was like it said like Karen's look at trial slays, or like something about like it killed something. Like it was some play on
She's
words about
slaying.
Uh,
like
She's
killing.
slaying it.
yeah.
And I'm like, no, no, but like you said, there's a victim here, and like this isn't cute or funny at all.
Yeah, and
No, and
it
I think
gets
it's because she's a
lost.
female that they do a lot of that as
Mhm,
well. Judging her affect, her appearance is
mhm,
very, very, this doesn't happen with a man in the same we always talk about the gender effect.
mhm,
But
100%.
I
100%.
do think, I think that it was a mistake to let her talk. I don't think this was a good idea. I really, really don't. And there could be a million different strategic reasons. I still think it's gonna come back and bite him in the ass somehow.
Well,
And
also they did the documentary before the second trial. They were doing it during her trial. I don't think they thought she
I
was gonna
know.
get convicted. I thought they thought it was just
uh-huh.
gonna be over.
But they should have had the
You know what
foresight to
though?
know it's
No,
possible.
yeah, yeah, no, they
I
should have
mean,
anticipated
hindsight's
that.
2020. I don't know. I mean, I'm not, as I always say on my show, I'm not a lawyer. I do not work in law enforcement. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a guy who's been through a lot of shit. That's it. But I'll tell you, it is, for me, but she'd already done so many interviews too. And they're
She had
pulling
to.
from
Yeah,
those
she did.
interviews. There's her
They are.
dad talking about like her calling him that morning and saying, Dad, I hit something. I think I hit something. So, I mean, there's so much out there. And then for me, the thing is like when you stack up these interviews, like she says, he went in the front door, then he went in the breezeway door, which I didn't even know what a breezeway was. I learned it from watching her interview, which is like a
I
side
didn't know
door or
either.
something in these houses. She went in the breezeway door and she's explaining it like it's a side door and a patio and a sunroom and this, that. I was like, oh, okay. That's a thing. All right. But there's like this inconsistencies that sort of add up. And then you add to that, she's talking about the alcohol that she consumed in the documentary and then talking about half shots and, oh, but it was only really a half drink. And they poured a shot in this. Look, I'm somebody who quit drinking 5 years ago.
Mhm.
Anyone who has ever had a drinking conversation with their partner has been like, "Well, it was only a half a shot that I put in the," like that is Alcoholics Anonymous 101. And you hear those stories all the time in the rooms. So it's like, I'm just like, "Oh, Karen, just please, nobody cares. Just don't, less is more in this situation." That's what I would have told her. But
Mhm.
again, she is defending herself. She wants to get her
But
story
this
out there, but I can't believe they let her do all that.
And
I
I
but
hope it doesn't come
exactly
back
what
to
you
bite her in
said
the ass.
sorry,
exactly
there's,
what you said is the reason that people don't let, their clients testify because of the inconsistencies, and they may be totally innocuous, but they're there, and it discredits
yeah.
them. Go ahead, Amy,
I just
sorry.
wanna say, as Laura said in the chat, I think this is a very valid point. She says, "I think they wanted to get her side out without having to have her be cross-examined on the stand." I think
Yeah.
that's strategic to me because they would have destroyed her on cross-examination, right? She didn't do herself any
I
favors with the interviews, but still, I think she did better off there than if she was on the stand.
I don't know if they would
I
have
think she would have
destroyed
gotten
her.
angry.
Yeah.
I think she
You
would have
think
gotten abrasive, and I think
yeah,
that's what the problem would have I think she would have been consistent, and I think she would have gotten abrasive, and I
yeah.
think jurors, whether or not it's warranted or not, they're watching her, and if they
Mhm.
perceive her to be some angry woman and they see her eyes flare and her hands go
Yeah.
up, they think, "Oh, look, she's got the
She's
kinda
capable.
temper that
Yeah.
if she gets mad, she could
Mhm.
run someone over." So, but yeah, I
Exactly.
agree. That was a
They've
good
done that to the other
point.
female witnesses, this Jen McCabe and this, who's the other Karen, I can't remember
Carrie?
her name, Carrie
I know
Roberts, and they attack
yeah.
them too, and they get, and I was watching sort of the playback of last year's testimony, and Jen McCabe goes back and forth with uh not David Yannetti, sorry, Alan Jackson. They're kind of
Yeah.
sparring, and
Yeah.
Brennan has definitely proven himself in this ARCA hearing that was
Mm.
on Monday, or the voir dire, that he likes to get abrasive too, and I could just imagine him
He does?
cross-examining her
Oh,
and just, oh
Oh,
yeah,
no.
he's
yeah. I wouldn't wanna be
he's a
cross-examined.
character for sure.
Yeah.
I am so Collier, as someone who he's really a character. It's one of the new things about this trial, and just briefly, we will talk about what's a little bit different and newer, but going back to trial 1, Collier, what do you think, if you had to just summarize, what do you think the strongest evidence against her and strongest evidence, um, for her is? Strongest piece of evidence. What does the defense have going for them, and what does the prosecution have going for them? The biggest strengths. And I know there's a lot of different pieces of evidence. I know they have, a taillight, and I know they have Karen's statements. I hit him. They have angry text messages. They have data from Karen's car. What do you think is the prosecution's strongest, or what was it in trial 1?
I think their strongest case is that she's not likable. I think, there's text messages that go, and I'll explain this, and like, no
Okay.
disrespect to Karen Reed. I don't mean it's not,
No, I
but
understand.
when there's a series of text message exchanges. This is before I started watching the trial, but I saw this. But she was talking to this guy, Brian Higgins, who's like an ATF officer who's involved in this, and he's also disposed of
Yes.
phones and all this
Mm.
just weirdness as well.
Shady stuff that
And
you're like, "What for?"
yeah, there's so much shady business going on with all these people, right? And she's like messaging like, "I think you're hot," and then she kissed him and things like that, and they use
Yeah.
that to paint this picture. Yeah, and these quote fiery text messages, yeah, they're like, God forbid somebody sees my phone, you know what I mean? So the things,
I'm intrigued.
if it's for girls, and not for me, but
Screen share.
I might look very nice, but I have made many a woman angry at times. Not intentionally, not by doing anything nefarious, just I don't know, but
Except by breathing.
I'm a fallible human. And but I mean, so like those text messages to like make her look like something. I mean,
Mhm.
that's utterly fanciful too. I
Yeah.
just think that
Yeah.
it's like, but the messages back and forth with Higgins, it's like, oh, okay, so she has this proclivity to be flirtatious, and there's all this, like, they went on vacation a month earlier, and there was this stress and with the kids and stuff. But is that look, she is an intelligent woman who is a professor, who has money. She's a financial advisor. Like, this is an
Yeah.
educated person. This
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
not, is she really going to throw her life away? But is she going to calculate, like, I'm going to kill him? Now, could she have gotten loaded? And because that's the worst thing I think for Karen Reed is she was drunk. So,
She was.
and I wish that she wasn't, because everybody else was too. And everybody always says, well, everybody else was drunk. Like, yeah, but they're not on trial.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She's on trial. I wish
it doesn't
that
matter for them.
she could say, look, I was sober that night. Then this would be a whole different story.
Oh yeah.
It would.
And she could, because she could say with absolute certainty, this is what I said, this is what I know, but she was intoxicated. Clearly,
Yep.
she was intoxicated. Clearly, she was somebody who consumed a lot of alcohol in her life, and this was like the nature of all their friends, right? And I'm not chastising her for this. You can live your life and whatever, but this is just in things that don't work in her favor. I think that's one of those things that's just like, oh, I wish you didn't say, or you didn't drink all these drinks and this and that, because then it just makes her, then they can say, well, are you sure you didn't hit, But every time the prosecution brings in witnesses, then the defense brings in their witnesses to refute, and their witnesses are a little more high caliber than the state's or the Commonwealth's witnesses. You've got and I can't remember the state trooper's name, but he was the one who did the investigation, did the test on the backing up of the SUV, the Lexus SUV, and all of that, and then they brought the ARCA experts on, which were originally, and it wasn't allowed in trial, but we find out that those were the feds that brought the ARCA experts in and gave that information.
Those are the crash reconstructionists.
Yeah, from ARCA.
Yeah.
And look, they're paid by the defense. They're probably paid pretty well for what they do.
I'm sure.
And you know what I mean?
All experts are compensated.
As they are, yes, as they are, and justifiably so. So, there's that, but they're saying, well, no, this couldn't have happened. There's the conspiracy theory with the dog bites and things like that. And people were are very adamant that he got bit by a dog. I mean, I guess, but then there's testimony that comes in and says it's an abrasion versus a bite. And there's one person says one thing, and the other, they bring somebody else to refute it. So it's like, how do you even keep the facts straight? Then you have the distortions that play out on social media where people are like, that's not a fact. That's not this. And again, we're not in the courtroom. We're not privy to what's going on, and we're not sitting on the jury.
True.
And no one knows what happened that night except for John O'Keefe and Karen Reed.
That is,
and maybe some other people we don't know. You know what I mean? But there are very few people, and none of them is talking.
Might I also add, I think it's possible Karen doesn't know what happened that night. Actually, I think it's very possible that she's convinced herself that she didn't do something, but it's possible she just doesn't know she did something. So.
And I think that's the hardest sort of pill to swallow in all of this. Is like, I just wish you weren't intoxicated.
But I think that is a possibility too. And I think one of the pieces of evidence working against her is she's going, I hit him. They keep saying she said, I hit him. And I think she's going, did I hit him? Did I hit him? I don't know. Is it possible? No, it can't be. No, it's so it is possible. It depends on how you interpret that, but it is possible that she doesn't know.
She convinced herself that she didn't, but
she's almost gaslighting herself. And it's also like, she's, and she's saying that, and I look at it from obviously a different lens, but it's like, could it be a trauma response from her? Like, she's in a panic, she thinks he's dead, but she doesn't know, and she's just freaking out, and she's just running through scenarios, not imagining that this is all going to come out in court. But in the Body in the Snow documentary, when they're saying she runs straight to the pile where he is buried and nobody notices that he's there, and she knows where he's at. And then she says in the documentary, I can't believe she says this, but she said she pulled out a piece of glass off the front of his nose from her glass that he took from the car. And I was like, oh man, like what? Wow. Like, when I heard that, I was like, what? Like, again, stop talking, please.
Yeah. Okay. No, certainly. Okay. As for the defense, sorry, Amy, let me just give you, you're monitoring what's going on, questions. So do we have a lot of questions and stuff for later? I'll make sure to see.
No, we're good. People are just kind of chiming in, but no actual questions yet.
Okay. We will take some questions if people want at the end, just so you know, or stop us in the middle. As for the defense, so I asked, what's the strongest piece? I know definitely what I think looks best for the defense, but any thoughts here? I'll just kick it off. I mean, I think the fact that, well, first, the state trooper who investigated, Michael Proctor, he is now being referred to as the Mark Furman of this trial.
I totally forgot about that. Like, here's the thing too, is like, and this is the thing that I just found, I just found completely. And by the way, shout out Mover Nation. Thank you guys for showing up and supporting women in crime. Thank you for being here. You guys
Thank
are
you,
all
guys.
awesome.
And thank you to
Um,
Women in Crime listeners too. I see some of
yes,
our usuals here.
yes.
We
Thank
don't
you to
have a cute
everybody.
name for them yet, but we'll think of one.
No, we need one. We definitely need a name. Okay, go ahead.
But
Sorry.
yeah, this Michael I mean, ugh. And and the police work in general, like when I was like, and I talked to this attorney, Mark Betterow, right at the very beginning when I got into this, I was like, what is going? I was like, there's, I was talking to this other former retired Massachusetts state trooper, Todd McGee, and I was like, wait, so there's red solo cups are collecting blood they're
Yeah.
doing this and that. And again,
Yeah.
there are things that are in police work that you're just doing the best you can, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do I think that has anything to do with that they were in the middle of a blizzard and were just doing their best to do something? I can't really fault the police for that.
Yeah.
But
No.
Michael Proctor, on the other hand, this dude with these text messages
Oh my
and the
god.
go no nudes yet, talking
No
about her,
nudes.
describing her appearance, just talking. This just reminds me of like the small town, local yokel cops
But he's
that are
the lead
just.
investigator on a murder
It's
case.
just
Not
so bad,
bad look.
beyond the pale. Why are you commenting on this? This is it's absurd. It's like, again, you talk about the Mark Furman of this. It's just this is the lead. This is the guy you're going with. This is your lead
Not
investigator, and this
anymore,
is
but
and of course he's been disciplined and fired or whatever
he's
is going
fired
on with
now. I
him.
mean,
But he and he had his hands in some other pies too, with some other really big cases. And now that's all coming under question. And yeah, not a great dude, and he's also connected. And there's a lot of talk with this look, I'm from a very small town, Mansfield, Ohio. And obviously the murder of my mother took place there, and everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody. Like, how do you not know everybody, right?
yeah.
At that time, I think we were like 20,000 people in my town. It's gotten bigger now, but like, you think about, everybody's saying, well, all the cops are everybody knows each other. It's like, well, of course they know each other. Of course they all go to
Yeah.
social gatherings.
Yeah.
There's like 4 places to eat in town. Of course everybody goes to eat at the same
Yeah.
place. Like, there's one pizza place, or there's one bar that's worth everybody goes. So of course they all know each other.
Yeah.
They all work in the same business. So I think that's a moot point there. But yeah, Proctor he was just an ass. He's just an asshole. You talk about coming off unlikable. He was the most unlikable person in the trial.
Do we think he's going to be on stand during the trial?
How
That's a
do you not?
question from the
How do you
chat.
not call
Yeah.
him?
Yeah.
How do you not call him?
Yeah.
No,
it'll be
he's
interesting.
I think he's definitely taking the stand, but now who is he gonna who does he benefit in this case?
I don't
I
know.
mean, if you think about it, really, like, the defense is gonna, the prosecution is gonna try to use him to elicit the evidence that he collected and the
Mhm.
legitimacy of that
And the cross-examination's just gonna destroy
and I
him.
mean, they already did, they've already destroyed him. He's had to read the text messages about talking
Oh,
about her. Oh god,
oof.
I'm not gonna repeat this,
No.
her
It
body
was
parts. It was
so
It's like
cringy.
you're watching and you wanna look away. I don't wanna watch this. I can't watch this.
It's
I'm
like watching
comfortable.
it's no pun intended. It's like watching a car accident in slow motion. Just like, I
Yeah.
can't believe. I mean, he took his licks. I mean, he got up there, he did it.
Yeah.
He read
So
it, but he looks like a jackass.
he does, and then you got the other, like, Brian Higgins, like you said. What is he destroying phones for? What are people destroying phones? I've never destroyed a phone.
No.
Dumps it at a military base because he knows it's where it's going. A
Yeah.
buddy told him. I think these guys were personally. I think all these guys were involved in some other
Some
shenanigans,
other stuff going on. Yeah.
cheating on their wives, maybe having some extracurricular activities with the cartels.
Yeah.
Maybe there's
Who
some money.
knows?
I think it's more of a training day thing than anything. I think
guess
it's more of a Denzel training day thing, just not as slick.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they were probably involved in. And then this happens, and they're like, "Oh shit, they're gonna
Oh,
come
shit.
for our phones. We got to destroy them because those 2 kilos that I peddled off, and we split the 20 grand. That's not gonna look too good."
We have a question in the chat about Jen McCabe, which I believe we've talked about, Megan, in the past. But
Yeah.
this is, what do you think about Jen McCabe, quote, forgetting to tell the federal agents who she called after she was first approached?
What do I think about her forget I
What
mean,
do you-
it's not good, but I have to tell you, when Jen McCabe testified the first time and I watched her, I thought she was believable.
Mhm.
I don't know, there was something about her that I believed when she said, "John O'Keefe was my friend, and I did not and would not have covered up I believed her. I felt it. I don't know. Do you guys have a different opinion?
I think she's likable. I think that helps.
I don't know. I mean, if I would say likable,
I don't know. Say likable.
I didn't find her uh, uncredulous. Is that the right word?
Mm,
I, you know, be, I'll say this: being a witness at a murder trial is hard,
very hard.
and her and her family had, justified or not, had been under consistent character assassination
Yeah.
for years, and just being, stalked on social media, stalked in the public, just threats against them all the time. And I just think that that's a lot. And
Yeah.
her forgetting something. Okay. I mean, I don't think anything is like this dun dun dun, it's not
I don't
a
either.
Netflix to them, you know what I mean? I don't think there's anything like that. I don't think there's some smoking gun that the prosecution
Yep.
is going to pull out this time around, other than playing Karen Reed's videos in court. I think that's the biggest thing that has just happened, but there's not
Yeah.
any other. But again, you cannot convict her. And again, I think they got the second-degree murder charge and all this stuff. It's like, oh man, like,
They're pulling out the cell phone to the battery temperature, which I think is
yeah, that was just
easy.
boring, and you can tell it's putting the
Yeah.
jury to sleep. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I just play
Easy
one
to
on TV.
debunk too, so I
It's
don't
just,
think that was great
and
either.
the Apple Health data, the going down the stairs, going up the stairs, all this stuff. And I look, I've just been, I've been I've used, I'm a wearable, health guy, and those things aren't the most accurate in the world. Like, it shows you all around the place when you're not. Yeah, I don't know how that is. The Google search, the Haas long to die in the cold,
Right,
open at 2:27 a.m. or whatever, but
right.
really it could have been open. It could have been
6
another tab.
o'clock.
I use open tabs on my phone all the time to search things that are
Yep,
relevant to me at the time that I opened up 3 months
yep.
ago. I know that those things, I just got done doing a documentary on C++, the programming language. So I understand how these things work a little bit now.
Ah, you're an
Um,
expert.
I mean, don't throw that word around. There's only two experts here, and I'm not one of them. But
No, 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 no.
but I know it. But in all seriousness, those things make sense to me. But again, they're arguing this, and reasonable doubt again is there's
Yeah,
beyond a reasonable doubt they have to prove her guilty. And I
yeah.
think that's the strongest thing she has going for her, is
Oh,
that there's just
definitely.
there's just so much confusion and so many bad actors in all of this, that
Or a lot
it
of
appears that. And I understand, people are like, oh, they run the town, they rule the town, they know this and that. Again, loose lips sinks ships. You're saying under the 45 people involved in this web, and they're under the pressure of the federal government,
yeah,
who's investigating this, and all this public scrutiny, and all this,
yeah.
they're under this microscope. So nobody talks. Come on, I
Yeah.
find that so difficult to believe. It's not like Cosa Nostra, you know what I mean? It's not John Gotti. These are,
Cosa
I
Nostra.
don't, it's not though. And you
No,
think
it's not.
about that, and it's not The Departed. I don't think, but again, I don't live there. I live in Los Angeles, like, so I don't know. But I do think that they were up to some shit would get them in a lot of trouble. I kind of wish, if that's the case, they would just come out and say, look, we were
I know.
running drugs. Can we just, because I think that it's important, because I think at the end of the day, what gets lost is that some a father, a good guy,
Good guy.
is dead, and we're not getting to the bottom of it at all.
I know.
Nobody's getting to the bottom of it. That's the thing. And the other thing that I have a problem with this whole social media exploitation, is they're starting to interview all these jurors from the first trial,
Right.
and now more and more of them are coming out and saying, I voted not guilty, I voted not guilty. Well, they're going to run out of jurors at some point, because there was
They
4
sure
guilty
are.
votes for that manslaughter. And I think, and shame on the media, in my opinion, for trying to smoke or assisting in letting people smoke out the other jurors that may have
I
pled
know.
guilty.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't like
No.
that, because people should not feel intimidated to be on a jury. This is
To be
how
on a jury.
this is how the justice system works. And if we start to dismantle it because of fear and intimidation,
Yeah.
nobody's going to get a fair trial, let alone Karen Reed. Like, nobody's going to get a fair trial. They're going to be like, I don't
No.
want to serve on that jury. I don't want to, hell no, don't ever. I mean, I already, have my, jury summons is misplaced.
Mhm.
It's like, I wouldn't want to be a part of that. So I
Well,
think that's a sort of a cheap trick that the media is pulling
yeah,
in this
and you
case.
have
It
to
has
be
nothing to do with
concerned.
Karen Reed or
Right.
anybody. It's
Right.
just, I think that them just engaging is
Mhm.
not good.
And you'd be concerned about those jurors if they get smoked out. Look at what's happened to some of the witnesses who were intimidated here,
Exactly.
who've been
Mhm.
harassed. So I think that's a really good point.
Marisol's treat is almost done. I gotta put it in the little holder so
Yes.
she doesn't
Well,
choke.
I only have 1 or 2 more things to talk about, and then, we can see if anyone has questions and say goodbye, but has public opinion changed since Karen's first trial? Or is this stronger? Is it, is this trial where more people are showing up? Is it more divisive? What's changed? Do you think anything has?
They've sectioned off the courthouse like
Oh, yeah.
20, like 200 feet. You
Oh,
can't
yeah.
be up in there, like, with your signs and whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like I see people, like creators, making fun of the other people from the other side on, look at their stupid signs and look at this. They all got stupid signs. They're all homemade. Like,
Yeah.
come on, like why are you attacking? Like, I understand you feel this way. I understand you're passionate that Karen Reed is
Yeah.
innocent, or you're passionate that she killed him, or you're
Yeah.
passionate about this. But like, why do you have to be nasty to one another? Like,
Mhm.
why does it have to get to this? It's just like politics. And I just
And nobody knows. There's no
and nobody
no
knows.
objectivity.
Nobody literally knows.
Somebody's gonna end up with, what do they call it? Like shit on their face, or what's
Egg on their face.
egg on their face. That makes more
Shit
I
on
mean,
their
you
face.
should too. I don't know what circles you run in there, Amy, but maybe, yeah.
My point, my point is, at least our listeners feel at home now. But yeah, the point is, like, everyone, I think, my opinion is everyone just got stronger and are doubling down in whatever their opinion was.
Yeah.
Doubling down.
I don't think
Doubling down.
either side has gained more traction. I think
Yeah.
everyone's just feeling much
Doubling down. I think that's the
Yeah.
best way to say it.
Uh-huh.
And shit on their face is the best thing Amy, I think I just love it. I just love it. You're so funny. You're so funny.
This is live, right? We can't edit that out, can we?
No, no, no.
What was it? Reginald Denny, like, can't we all just get along? Was that him who said that? Reginald Denny, or
Sure.
I mean, it
don't
could
know.
be him. I'm not sure who said it, although I have heard it before. Someone had asked us actually on one of our shows or something else we did on Karen Reed if we thought, like, would there be fights break out? Maybe it was when I was on Surviving the Survivor, and I was like, it's possible. Like, people are really,
You mean once there's a verdict, you think, like, it'll go
yeah, like, could it get physical? And
well, which direction do you think, do you think there'll be more of an outrage if she's found guilty or not guilty?
I
don't
think people are going to be outraged either way.
either way, for
Or do
sure.
you think one side's a little more, I don't wanna say unhinged, that's not the right word, but more passionate, so to speak?
Her supporters, I think, are more
Yeah.
passionate. I
Yeah.
think from what
Mhm.
just from
I mean, there's more of them. There's more of
Yeah,
them, from
yeah,
what I
and
understand.
outward appearances. So any final thoughts here, or anything you guys want to cover that I haven't? People have asked me, people have emailed us, and I'm sure you guys, is she innocent? Is she guilty? I'm like, that's not the question. The question, I think, that we all, at the end of the day, I don't know if she's innocent or guilty. And like Collier said, only 2 people know, right?
Yes.
But it's, is a jury going to convict this woman based on the evidence? When we did our first episode, I said I didn't think so. I thought it would be a hung jury. I wasn't surprised. I do not think there's any way they're going to convict her on a second-degree murder. There is a possibility, maybe the manslaughter, that people go, oh, maybe this happened, but I think it's going to be a really tough sell to get people to convict her.
I think if she does, I think the finger gets pointed at, why did you talk? Don't talk to the cops without a lawyer, and don't talk to a documentary camera crew without your lawyer. Oh, but you did.
Yeah.
That, I think, would be, if anything's going to be her undoing, it's going to be that. And
Yep.
I think that was look, whatever people think about Brennan, I think it's a genius move that he brought those videos in. And he's just like, okay, great. She's not going to talk. Let's let her words impeach her.
Of course.
I mean, I did the same thing with my father in my film. I just put the camera on and just said, here's your opportunity to tell the story.
Mhm.
And he just, can't. Let me be very clear. I am not comparing Karen Reed to my father in any stretch. They're weird. They're not even in the same universe of one another. Let me just be very clear. But, there is this aspect of, like, you let a camera run, and even if it's like well, it's not the best thing I should say. Probably I'll look back at this episode and go, Collier, why'd you say it? But no, in all seriousness, it's she's trying to defend herself. She's saying these things, and I think that if it does end up that she is convicted on whatever charges, that's where you can point the finger, because I don't think any of the other the evidence, any of that stuff really directly points to that, because they've got, the defense seems to have an answer for everything. Now we'll see in the second trial, but I don't see it really changing from last trial.
Yeah, Amy,
I think we're gonna see I think we'll see a hung jury again.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Then what do you do?
I mean, we've seen it in cases before, Megan, right?
Oh, we have seen,
Ryan
of
Whitmer.
course. Yeah, we've seen 3-4 trials.
Yeah.
I have to say, if there's
The
a hung
amount of
jury,
money, right?
I think because of the momentum and the media, I think they'll go for trial 3 if there's a hung jury.
I 100% agree with you.
Which it seems like, oh my gosh,
And they're gonna double down that.
what is that? If you double down, all right, sorry.
Maybe
do we have any questions or comments from
no,
anyone?
I've kind of been, as we're going along, looking, and everything people saying, in line with everything we're all saying, for the most part.
Did they also appreciate your shit on the face comment?
No one said if they appreciated that or not, but it seems like, at least in the chat, it seems like people might be 50-50 too.
Oh yeah, I would bet.
Yeah, I think they are, and I think and it's interesting that like the things that I hate are like the arguments of like the judge is biased, the prosecutor's an
A lot
idiot.
of
I don't
people
like
are
his
talking
stupid
about
face.
sorry.
Karen Reed says I don't like her RBF that she has. She's a killer. I'm like, you're out of your minds. Like, who cares?
Listen, a lot of people don't like the judge. I'll tell you that from the chat.
But then she did. But then she did a motion the other day and said and
favorable
to Karen, and was just like, you're going to win this. Just let me finish what I'm saying, because I don't want to keep talking about this. So she seems to be, at least in this trial. I mean, I wasn't paying too much attention to her, but she seems to really, from creators that I really respect that are talking about this, who I think know a lot, they're like, she's doing a really good job of balancing this time around.
Yeah,
and
I think so too.
There's so much focus. It's like myopia, right? Of what we're looking at here. So like, why would she want to make a wrong move? Why do these people, why would they want to? It doesn't make any sense, and I think that a lot of people, will say, again, this is where I have this trouble with this conspiracy theory, is they're saying, well, they're prosecuting it because they're being pressured by the Alberts and the McCabe's, or all these people are pressuring them, and so they're being forced to do this. I'm like, so hold on. So you're telling me that somebody who is a lawyer, who is now taking on this case as special prosecutor, who has no dog in this fight, or all these people that are involved on the prosecution side, are somehow going to take the fall for this family that put their lives, their families' lives, risk their rep, go to prison for these people? Do they have something over everyone in this town? I mean, I don't. That's where I feel that if you're gonna buy into this massive conspiracy theory, like, you have to ask yourself those questions, like, who has the most to lose? And I'm not saying that these people weren't doing something nefarious, but but again, two things could be true at the same time. They could be doing something nefarious and it has nothing to do with this case. And I think that's the question that I don't think a lot of people are asking. And I think that's I've never understood why exactly. Like,
there's a great comment in the chat that might be a good way to wrap things up here.
Okay.
Clayton says, my kids were in diapers the last time I had shit on my face. It was an explosive diaper change. So as a new mom,
I was going to say the same thing. I've heard that happens. I don't have kids, but I've heard that happens.
It does happen. And I think it's a valid point. Yeah. So maybe that's where it came from.
Well, anyway, guys, thank you so much. So I'm definitely on Karen Reed trial watch still,
yes.
And I'm happy to talk about it at any time with any listeners. And I'm still on the edge of my seat. I can't wait to see what happens. And I do like watching trials, and call it part of our occupation. I like to say it's for, I wonder if but I think independent of our occupation, I'd probably be sitting around trial watching anyway. I'm probably one of
now you don't feel guilty about it because it's
right now. I try to use it for something positive and constructive. All right. Well, anyway, thank you guys.
I watch guitar videos on YouTube. That's what I go to, like guitar videos, mental health. Like I can't keep up with that. I can't keep up with that. The trials.
But that's more constructive than what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that's probably better. You probably sleep better at night.
It's a
Yeah, no,
lighter
it's
lift.
definitely why I wake up screaming, some nights. It's not even a joke, but, all right, guys, thanks so much for hanging with,
Great, thank you. Thank you so
for
much, Collier.
Ladies,
yeah,
thank you so much for having me. It's so great
oh,
to
it was
be on and
great.
get to know you guys and have a fun chat.
Oh,
Yes,
I
great.
love it. All right. All right, everyone,
Thank
thanks for
you all.
joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
That was great.
Yeah, that was great.